For Morningstar, I'm Christian Charret. Exchange-traded funds in Canada recently topped $100 billion in assets under management for the first time in May. I'm here today with Mr. Alain Desbiens from BMO ETFs to talk about sales trends in the ETF market since the beginning of the year. Alain, thank you very much for being here with us today.
Hello, Christian.
So let's start with equity funds. Equity funds in Canada had all categories had positive sales trends for the month. So let's go a little bit deeper. What kinds of funds were popular or have been popular since the beginning of the year?
I would say that the month of May saw a lot of inflows in all categories in a beautiful $100 billion indeed milestone for the industry. What was interesting was, a trend that is really present in the Canadian space is the index versus smart beta. And we saw in the month of May, again, like the beginning of the year, still a lot of adoption about the main ETF index in Canada. But we saw a lot of inflow also on the smart beta. What is really interesting in terms of trends is since the beginning of the year, we saw a lot of inflows on the US side, mostly hedge. I'm thinking about our ZUE as an example. This is a good proxy for that. And in the month of May, what we saw is something a bit more different. We saw half of the new inflow going in our unhedged ZSP and half going into our ZUE, which is the hedge one. So really, we're seeing that the institutional player, the retail player, portfolio managers are using ETF for index equity in the index equity space, but they're using also a lot of the capacities of hedging that the Canadian industry has offered to them.
It's interesting when we contrast with what's happening in the US on the ETF market. Equity funds have actually been in redemptions across pretty much all categories. Now, you'd think from a Canadian point of view, the US market hasn't really been that hot, but the currency movements have been. But it doesn't seem like there's a clear preference one way or the other.
And it's funny to see this because we've seen a lot of outflows from the main indices in US, but we've seen a lot of inflows going into the low vol, which is similar to what happens in Canada. I'm thinking about our ZLB, ZLU in the month of May, TLV. So we've seen a lot of inflows, and this is interesting because in the top 10 most bought exchange-traded funds in Canada, this is mostly, I would say, an index game, like the ZUE, the ZSP, the ZEA, but we see more and more smart beta ETF in the top 10 most bought exchange-traded funds in Canada, especially in Canada, like a bit in US, the low vol one.
Okay. Are there any other trends besides low volatility that came out?
We'll come back to Canada. I mean, there was a lot of new inflows in ZCN and XIC. What we saw, though, which is a bit different from the US in terms of the top 10, was a lot of outflows for sector funds, especially the oil and gas. This is the financial one. Maybe, I don't know, maybe some of the people are taking their profits right now. I know for the Canadian banks right now, we saw a lot of inflows on the financial side. I think more and more people are looking to the US bank maybe to go in at that point, which, people can do with a ZBK, ZUB. So this is really interesting because we see that there's trends on a monthly basis around currency, a lot around the sector also. And there is a rotation, and people are using more and more exchange-traded funds also for this.
Now, it could be also that a lot of it is performance chasing or reverse performance chasing. Energy has had a really bad performance last year, though they've been doing fairly well since the beginning of this year.
Though I've not seen yet in the top 10 most bought ETF in Canada or ZGJ or ZGD, I mean the global gold that we saw a lot of inflow in US, and even if those ETF has really performed super well, fortunately, I think, or unfortunately, we don't see them in the top 10 most bought ETF. We see more the core one used. So maybe we're a bit more conservative. We go less on sector in Canada, the top 10 most bought ETF. We go more with the top indices, and we go more with the big, broad, low vol beta exchange-traded funds.
And one final point I wanted to make is congratulations to BMO. You were the top-selling ETF fund firm in Canada. Your market share is closing in on 29% right now.
It's been a stellar year for the exchange-traded fund industry. Month of March was the best month ever in the ETF industry since the creation of the ETF. And for us, this is a really awesome beginning of the year with more than $4.2 billion of net flows. The industry is growing rapidly. There's now 16 ETF providers in Canada. That's a contrast when BMO joined in the market in June 2009. There was only 4 exchange-traded funds providers, and I'm pretty sure we're going to finish the year at roughly 20 exchange-traded fund providers. So more and more, it's going to be important that people explain what they do on the fixed income space, on the main indices space, and on the smart beta space. This is really the three areas that we need to watch on the ETF market in Canada, Christian.
Interesting times ahead. Alain, thank you very much for sharing your insights with us today.
Thank you.
And for Morningstar, I'm Christian Charret. Thank you for watching.